Hi there, welcome to Tap. In a little bit, you will hear an interview I did with Marguerite Manning, and I'll introduce her and we'll dive deep into Karmic Astrology. So I'm very happy to present you with this piece. I just wanted to put out there before that it's really important that we are okay with looking at astrology differently. I don't know where you are at your journey, but I know that we can get really passionate about this one perspective and then this is the truth. But we know from speaking with different astrologers, reading different astrologers, that there are so many ways to the truth. And many times the same sort of truth. But there are just different interpretive techniques to get there. And so this can both be if you're studying astrology and you're thinking, there's so many ways of doing it, I have to find the right one. Well, actually, what you have to find is what resonates with you, as with anything. And when you have that, then it's a great help because you can live in terms of meaning. We talk about that, meaningfulness and purpose. So it's really different what is invoked by the same symbols in each of us. So just have that in mind when you listen to this, that this is a certain, she calls it the therapy for the soul, and it's called the Karmic Astrology. And if it doesn't match with what you've heard before, just keep an open mind and see if this approach is, I think any approach is interesting, really, especially when it is soul-centered, or what you could say is reawakening us to something more than what we thought was possible, and just like, there is something more here, now I can sense it even deeper because of this information. Then I think we're on a good path. So I really hope that you enjoy this. She's very generous in sharing, also going around the zodiac wheel. So if you know your 12th house, then she is giving a little interpretation into this logic, into her karmic astrology system. So thank you so much for being here, and here's the interview. You are listening to Therapeutic Astrology Podcast with me, Manna, and today I am joined by a very special guest. I'm so happy to be together with Marguerite Manning, who is an author of several books, for example, Cosmic Karma, Understanding Your Contract with the Universe. And I think we're going to be talking about that. And also Sign Language, Decoding Your Contract with the Universe. And recently also published a book on Juno. So Marguerite Manning is a karmic astrologer and founder of Therapy for the Soul, which I'm really excited to hear about. So you are so welcome, Marguerite Manning. Thank you for being here.
Mana, thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I love speaking with anybody who shares my passion for the science of karmic astrology in general, but karmic astrology in particular.
Yeah, and we share a similar name a little bit. Did you notice? Manning and Manna. So that's so
exactly,
similar, similar names, and then absolutely a similar interest. So karmic astrology. See, I could say that about what I do, but a lot of times we mean something different, right? By what we're saying. And also,
correct.
As astrologers, we just have different perspectives, which is part of the joy, I think, that there's so many ways to decipher and analyze and interpret the chart, right? So I'm just
Absolutely.
I really want to hear, just to begin with, what is karmic astrology to you, and what is it that, because this is also a field that you started looking into in 1994, if I'm not mistaken, and that was a new thing at that point.
Correct. It was. I had reading a lot of astrology books, and I was an astrologer. And one astrologer who's very famous, she had a book out, Secrets from a Stargazer's Notebook, Debbie Kempton Smith. She's passed, and she's not with us anymore. But she had a little blurb in her book about the 12th house and karma, and I was so fascinated. That's when you know when something is your calling. You can't put it down. It doesn't leave you. I had my husband take me into New York City. We didn't live far from it at the time, to one of the biggest bookstores in the time. And devoured everything they had on came home that night with maybe about 30 astrology books, different book authors that I had already read other books from. Not one of them talked about karma or the 12th house or karmic astrology.
Mm.
And what karmic astrology was, as I learned from Debbie Kempton Smith, was finding the soul's past in the birth chart. And this is my passion in life is, and as you said, this cryptic diagram, this tool of our trade, the birth chart, what a lot of people don't understand is it's actually a cosmic snapshot of what the sky above and around and beside you looked like at the moment of your birth, when you drew your first independent breath. So our ancient astrologers believe that this picture not only gave you us and some insight into who we are and what we have to work with in this lifetime. But if we knew where to look for information, we could find out where we came from in the previous one. And before my books were published, Llewellyn Worldwide did some focus groups on them, and I did my own. And what I found out before I wrote Cosmic Karma was while a lot of people don't believe in, or didn't at the time, didn't believe in past lives or life before this one or life after death, let's say, just about every one of them did believe that the soul went somewhere after it left this lifetime. So I think that's what we tend as human beings to misinterpret. That's what karmic astrology and what the ancient astronomers believed, that we have more than one life in this lifetime. And while if it's Catholicism or any other religion where you believe you're going to heaven or to a hereafter, that's what I believe we were being taught in these religions and these spirituality, that do good in this life, put out good, because it's only coming back to you in the next one. And heaven isn't necessarily a place up in the clouds with angels, as much as it's the next lifetime, you're not coming back to the hell of having to go through the same issues you put out, but on the receiving end of them. And I think that's where religion and spirituality get seriously divided. I think man came in and tried to force us to be spiritual and putting in these rules, these laws, these punishments for when we did poorly, when what I see in karmic astrologer is the universe saying us, good job. Now do better in the next time.
Yeah.
Good job. Don't do that, unfortunately. And I used to use the analogy that when my children were very little, and if they were to come out into the kitchen when I was cooking, and I said, don't touch the stove because you'll get burned, it's hot. And they touch it and they get burned and they look at me and they say, you're punishing me. And I was, no, like we were taught these universal laws, one of compensation. You put out what you get back, you get back what you put out. So God or universe or the universal mind or that omnipresent power that created all of us isn't punishing us. It's just the way the universe works. In order for this universe to be divinely balanced, what we put out must come back to us. We must experience it on another level. So it's not punishment. Now, knowing that, wouldn't you think twice about what we put out? And I think that's what every single religion tries to accomplish, tries to inspire us to do. But I think the methods are not all that good.
No.
Because it's only when we realize that we're an integral part of this working universe and we have a say in our future and our in fact, we picked a lifetime and chose all the lesson plans we wanted. Now all we have to do is come in and live up to that. Like it's like signing up for a class. Okay, so I'm going to take relationships 101 in this lifetime, and then we sit there and say, oh, this is too hard, I don't want to do it. So I don't think there's any punishment for that. I think just the next lifetime, guess who's going to come back and have to take relationships 101 again?
Yeah.
And that's really all that it is. It's really well, somebody once said to me, when you look at the birth chart, what's the most, what's the best thing about our birth charts and the birth energies we were born under? And I said, well, we all have free will. And then they said, well, what's the worst thing? And I said, we all have free will, because we have this fate, this destiny that we chose, and the universe is working with us. That doesn't mean it's going to be a joyride and we're not going to have any bumps along the way, but that's what growth is, right? But when we choose not to live up to it or to go in another direction, then we tend to think of ourselves as victims and, that we're being punished when in fact, many times it's just the fact that we weren't staying on the path that we chose for ourselves.
Okay, okay. I have some questions. Okay.
Sure.
So, I think I just because we were talking about already your, I can hear your logic in there around the contract, right? The contract that we made. So let's go back to that. I just want to first ask you about when you did this, when you started this work, and like you described, you go into this bookstore and there's not so much around the karma in relationship
Correct.
to astrology. So how did you, yeah, you found that one teacher that you mentioned, and like, how did it expand for you to
She brought it
be,
to my attention, and
yeah,
then I spoke to her later on because she was an astrologer, and I told her what I was going to do, and she said, "That field is all yours." Like she wasn't interested, and she's a wonderful astrologer. And I felt like coming from her, I was empowered to go ahead and look for some answers. So knowing very well, if you're an astrologer, what the 12th house represents, that's the soul's home. The 12th house is the soul's home. So in karmic astrology, that's my jumping off point. And that's where I started with the 12th house. And then I went to I studied I looked into the Edgar Casey research,
okay,
looked over a lot of his writings right here in Virginia Beach in my state, and went
wow,
down there. What I loved about what Edgar Casey talked about, and he talked about astrology long before anybody else was talking about astrology as a science. The eternal spirit that he channeled, Ra, spoke about the heavens and the way the universe worked and how that affected people. But one of the things that he mentioned, and other physicists and people that are into spirituality have mentioned it, is the first 30 degrees above the eastern horizon is the soul's home. That's the 12th house. So it's where the 12th house falls in your chart. This is all very mathematical, which is why it is a science. So those first 30 degrees above the eastern horizon, that first house is, as Edgar Casey said, the portal to the soul. This is where the soul comes into this lifetime. As you're taking your first independent breath, the soul is coming in through that doorway. So what I wanted to find out was how much could I learn from that doorway? And there's 30 degrees in every house. And I did a series of a long time coming for all these past years of studying each degree on this, not only each sign on that 12th house, but each degree on that 12th house, and
right.
what the ruling planet is of that sign, and where is the ruling planet in your chart. It's like playing a Beatles record backwards and finding some kind of, amazing message. I was just taking a very different perspective on the birth chart. All astrologers have this tool in front of them, and some of them focus. Most astrologers, when you're doing a chart for someone, you focus on the first house. That's the first house of physical self. So the ruler of that house is your chart ruler. And that's how an astrologer works. With me, your chart ruler from your past life is the ruler of the sign on the 12th house. And that brings us back to a time where your soul was just coming. I say it's the cosmic contrails. I get to see the debris field that the soul left on its way in. And I go back and I pick it apart and I find out, why did it come into this life? What was the thing that the 12th house is? That's why the 12th house is about loss. It is about your psyche. It is about past lives, the soul. And it always gets a bad rap because it's called the house of secret sorrows and self-undoing, correct? But embrace that because it's the unconscious mind. So those are where the things that you don't know that are hanging you up, your secrets from a past life, the things that undid you yesterday. Wouldn't it be nice to know what the undoing was in the last lifetime so you can avoid it in this one? Because what the soul has a tendency to do, and I think you and I spoke about this before, the soul likes anything familiar. Thank God we have an ego and a conscious mind down here on planet Earth, or we'd never get anything done. We'd live in the past and be talking about the good old days. Not only that, we'd be embracing everything that was familiar to us, whether it be a person, a situation, or a wound. And we all know that just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's good for us. So that's why we need the conscious ego mind to kind of pick through this field of debris and say, okay, this was yesterday, and this is what I promised to avoid in this lifetime. So as I say to people, you need the soul on board, but you don't want it driving the bus down here because this is the realistic physical planet Earth. And the soul is so much happier when it's not dealing with the physical realities and the harshness of life. So we have to take it through. We need the soul to get there. We need the soul to find out what happened yesterday. But what I tell my clients when they call up for a personal reading, get very emotional sometimes when I'm telling them things about their past. It's coming to their conscious mind for the first time, but it's so familiar. And I say, just remember, the good news is this was yesterday and yesterday's gone. This is not so. And so many of us, whatever the sign is on our 12th, we know it's a loss. So we tend to avoid it in this lifetime, not realizing why we are, when in fact we're supposed to embrace that loss and not lose again in this lifetime. So it's whenever the unconscious mind gets in charge of calling the plays or making the decisions, we don't do very well. But we do need the unconscious part of us to tap into that collective consciousness. We can't get there physically. We can't get to yesterday, to our psyche, to our psychic, or our intuition, our abilities that are metaphysical, just like it says, metaphysical, above the physical. We can't get there with our conscious brain and our physical self. We need the soul to get us there, but we need to be somewhat of a referee once we do. So once I started picking apart at the 12th house, and it took years, and then I put my formula together, did some focus groups, and it particularly with my own children. When I shared a story with you with one of my daughters when she was very little. She was going through something that was very rough, not like her, and picked apart her 12th house, and she gave me permission. She's a grown woman now to tell her story, but she was very little, and she was getting in trouble a lot for this one particular behavior. And that night she was sitting in bed, and I was feeling so bad. She and her sister, they were going to sleep, and her little eyes are blinking at me in the dark, and I'm saying, I know that at one time in your life you felt, a long time ago, in another life you felt you had to behave this way. But you don't now. Look around you. You have a family, a sister in the next bed, mom and dad. And the little eyes just blinking at me in the dark. And I thought, okay, she's going to be calling a psychiatric ward tomorrow to pick up her mother, thinking that I had made no impact at all. And behavior changed immediately the next day. I was almost, once I validated her soul and put her fears in perspective, they stopped. So then I started using it on my clients and doing my traditional astrological sessions, but then with a little focus on the 12th house. And that became not only more important to my clients, but that became my passion. And I believe that in this lifetime, you should never be doing as a service to other people what's not your passion. So as an astrologer, I could do transits, and I do them for my family, and I do regular sessions, but that's not what I do anymore as a profession, because I pass that off to the astrologers who are passionate about that.
So
the way I am about looking for the soul's past in the birth chart. And it never stops. I never stop exploring different patterns and different formulas for getting more information to help people deal with what many times are talents they've buried. The 12th house is full of fears and phobias, but also talents that you've been discouraged from using, or it's most importantly, it's your improper programming from your last life. Think of
improper programming,
your unconscious habit patterns. The analogy I use is when I bought my first car, I thought I was being so creative, picking out this turquoise car. It was a convertible, and it was going to be the coolest thing on the road. And the first time I bought a new car, and I get out there, and it's like every time I'm turning a corner, I'm seeing this car. And I'm saying, when did this happen? And it was the minute I put this thought in my conscious mind, I started seeing them. And that's exactly what it is about the 12th house. Once you bring forward to the conscious mind what happened in the past, all of a sudden it starts to recognize unconscious habit patterns that have been getting us into trouble. Or more importantly, it's making us feel horrible about ourselves. Or not tapping into gifts that we were supposed to use in this lifetime and that we're really good at, because in a last lifetime, we believed it was our undoing. And the improper programming is, it was never our undoing. Something else was.
Right. Oh, I'm wrapping my mind around this, because as you speak, I can hear that you say soul and then you say unconscious, and that's, I don't know if it's the same thing, but it's like a part of the soul is at least unconscious to us. Is that correct?
The soul is the unconscious part of us. The ego is the conscious part of us, and the soul is unconscious. So when people in this lifetime are intuitive or psychic, at that moment, they're tapping in, the soul is taking over.
Right.
The
That
soul is always
makes
there, but it's the
yes.
unconscious part of us. It's the part that we're not consciously
I
aware that is
see.
controlling us.
I see. Okay, and then the 12th house, that's the whole 12th house, and it's the 12th house cusp, and it's anything in the 12th house, right?
For not just anything in the 12th house, but not only the cusp, but the degree of the sign.
Right.
Just if you'd like, I could do a quick trip around the zodiac and kind of tell you what not only what the primary loss of each sign and what was buried, but then if I go into my analysis when I look at a chart, it's the degree. It's where the ruler of that sign is in your chart to tell me more about what derailed you.
Right.
And
So
yeah,
there's always a deeper analysis once you go into it. But did you just offer to give a around the wheel?
yes, if you'd like to do that, just very quickly, we can take
That
a,
would be so great. I think for the listeners, that would be awesome to just have something concrete, and then you can look up, where your 12th house is if you don't know. But
well, it's a very, I have a workbook now, as you know, out
yeah,
on my website because this is so detailed, and a session takes like 3 hours before I even get my client on the phone to do all the math. But
yeah,
this workbook gives people the first 6 keys to finding and unlocking. And that can be incredibly helpful just to get that kind of information. So just hearing this going around that will resonate, that will always resonate with the soul when you
yeah.
tell the soul what its major loss was. Okay, let's just start like from top to bottom. Aries. If you came into this incarnation with any degree of Aries on your 12th house, Mars is the planet that you look for in the chart, but that's about lost glory. Your ability to be a leader or to be a champion in some way was taken away from you in your last lifetime. And I figure out how that happened. With Taurus on the 12th, it's lost talent. Venus is the ruler of Taurus. And you were some kind of artist or committed partner that was forced to bury the best things about you due to your partnership in that lifetime, or more importantly, due to the lack of self-worth. Someone took away your self-worth in that lifetime. Gemini, it's about lost voice. You were a communicator or a teacher that was forced to, you were led to believe that your communications led to some horrible things. And so in this lifetime, you have a difficult time with that. If it's Cancer, I think we talked about this with you.
Yeah,
No
that's
two ways.
me.
Lost family.
Yeah.
You either lost a child in that lifetime, or you were separated from your family, or you were separated from your mother. But in this lifetime, that kind of nurturing, you must be a parent or a caregiver in this lifetime. Somebody who brings emotional security, domestic stability to others. Now, Leo on the 12th is about lost stardom. Your personal distinction, your star power was taken away. You were supposed to be somebody in the public eye in the last lifetime. And now the public scrutiny is too much for you because you felt that public scrutiny led to your decline, that led to your downfall. Virgo, it's about lost competence. Mercury is the ruler for Virgo, and you were some kind of expert or public servant. Your critical judgment and skills are suppressed now in this lifetime because you were led to believe they caused your undoing in that last lifetime. And the things that we're suppressing are always the things that are really gifts in this lifetime. Like for Leo, it's your ability to lead. For Virgo, it is your critical judgment and your analytical skills. Now with Libra, it's about lost self-esteem. You were, again, very much like Taurus, you were a collaborator, a committed collaborator, a very talented one in the sense of artistic, and your personal feelings and your sense of happiness and everything about you, the people that you loved, anything that you valued in that lifetime had to be suppressed. You felt it had to be sacrificed for the people that you loved. You had to take the hit. And that in this lifetime, you'd feel very, very, you feel you need a partner desperately. You can't do things alone as a result of that. If you have Scorpio on the 12th, it's about lost control and trust. Your trust was severely compromised in that lifetime. So shared intimacy in this lifetime is a real challenge for you. And there's a reason for that. There's some kind of disaster, catastrophic event where the people you were counting on were not there for you. But again, as I tell my clients, that was yesterday. We have to remember where to put this information in the past where it belongs. Now, Sagittarius on the 12th means lost freedom, your intellectual, physical, and spiritual freedom to think, to communicate, to explore those areas was taken away from you in your last lifetime. Some kind of extreme, either religion or spouse or in-law issue where you were married and you were kept confined. And you had to give up your brilliant mind to some degree and your academic credentials. You couldn't do you couldn't broaden your horizons in that lifetime the way you wanted to. So now in this lifetime, that's what you're back here to do. Now with Capricorn on the 12th, like Cancer, it's always your Cancer and Capricorn are the mother, the father signs of the zodiac. So when you have either one of them on your 12th, like you did, your parents in this lifetime or lack of them is very karmic. So with Capricorn on the 12th, your father in this lifetime or lack of him being around had great impact on you because this was about your last lifetime lost status. You were a parent yourself or a career professional whose rightful authority or status had to be sacrificed in that lifetime. And now in this lifetime, you feel that must be done behind the scenes. You can't exert your authority openly without fear of retribution. Aquarius on the 12th is lost genius. There's no doubt about it. You're a brainiac and a rebel whose like kind of creative ingenuity had to be sacrificed in that lifetime. You weren't allowed to fly your freak flag. You weren't allowed to be different than everybody else. And now in this lifetime, there's a part of you that feels you can't express that openly. You can't express that part of you. You've got to closet it and keep it hidden from everybody else for the fear of being considered a freak, for the fear of being considered a public outcast. And in this lifetime, it's just the opposite. You're here to fly that freak flag. You're here to be different, to show the rest of us how to march to the beat of a different drummer. Now with Pisces on the 12th, if you have a Pisces on its own house, the house of the soul, you're a lost soul in that lifetime. You were, you're someone whose utopian ideals and idealistic belief in mankind had to be sacrificed in that lifetime. You just wanted to belong to something higher and bigger than yourself in that lifetime, whether it was a religion, whether it was the armed forces, whether it was the government. You wanted to belong to something higher for the good of people, and you ended up becoming a victim yourself in that lifetime. You were intuitively creative and spiritually enlightened, but you were lost and physically broken in that lifetime. And this is a quick trip around the zodiac. In this lifetime,
can I just applaud that? That is so impressive. I'm impressed with your. So you're Gemini. I can say that, right? I think people people can hear that. I think just that from the way that you are just able to almost say all of that in just one breath. That is pretty cool.
Without coming up for air, that's one of my many talents. But it's just something, and it's like anything else. It's like when you're really passionate about something, I never stopped learning about this either. I love talking to other astrologers, and I love finding other things, because I know this is just the tip of the iceberg with the things that you can find in the birth chart that can actually help you in this lifetime go forward with the life that you've chosen. And as I say in my book, Cosmic Karma, I believe like sometime after the Big Bang, when our souls were circling this earth and having to, which is a whole nother podcast about what I believe happened to based on what I read about through Edgar Cayce, what I believe happened to our souls and why our spirits are down here on this physical planet. But in any event, here we are on this physical planet. And so we have to navigate, our souls have to navigate this physical realm and with a mental perspective in a spiritual way. In other words, we have to have what I call a very high quality life according to the universe, which is doing something the body has worked for, but the soul can be proud of.
The body has worked for, and the soul is proud of.
Right. We're not here to sacrifice. We're not here to be Mother Teresa's, and that's very impressive. We give up everything, unless that was her plan all along. But what we're here to do is accomplish what we didn't in the last lifetime and do it in a physical manner where we're helping others, not sacrificing ourselves for others. So if we can make $1 million, there's nothing wrong with making money, especially if we're giving back to the community or giving other people jobs because of it. So this embarrassment of riches where, you can't be spiritual and have material things, that's wrong, because people need material things. They need a roof over their head. They need bread on the table.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody that allows them to get those things, or more importantly, you build the homes that you allow people. But it's all about moderation, and it's all about when we do succeed, what do we do with our success? We enjoy it, but do we also help other people achieve theirs? And that's the key.
Okay, I have a few questions again, Marguerite. There's so much good stuff in there. So I was wondering about when you say the 12th house, that it's that you are held back in this area because you have this improper memory of what happened, but are we supposed to, is that like our life purpose? Because I've also heard it like this is what we're supposed to move away from, but it sounds like for you that's actually what we're here to do. Is that correct? How are we to do our 12th house in this life?
Okay. Your purpose in this lifetime is your sun sign. That's your, as I say in cosmic karma, that's the sun is your karmic degree. This story is always in the stars. The constellations or the signs represent the past. So you're here in this lifetime. Let's just say a Gemini. A Gemini comes into this lifetime. Sun in Gemini. Okay. So this sun in Gemini talks a lot, is a communicator. The sign represents of where they earned their stripes in their last lifetime. Yeah. What was the last class they aced? Gemini. So they know how to talk. They know how to communicate. They know these things. Would be like having a teacher degree. You wake up in the morning, you don't have to say, what did I learn in college? You're a teacher. You know the trade. But what house is that sun in? That's the heavy lifting. So if you're here to shine through your sun sign, what house is that? And if it's the 10th house, then you're here to do it for the outside world, to teach the outside world, to be a communicator in the outside world. That's the hard part. Being the sun sign is never the hard part for us. The house placement, because those are our promises to the cosmos. That's where we said to the cosmos, okay, I'm going to come back. This time I will do it in the outside world. And now if you have Leo on the 12th house and you have your sun in the 10th, you're saying, I'm going to come back and be a communicator in the outside world. But Leo on the 12th in the last lifetime is saying, you know what? When you were in your last lifetime, public scrutiny is something that you believed was your downfall. So you might be somebody in this lifetime that just doesn't want to put themselves out there. So that's how your 12th house, I say to you, this 12th house is getting in the way of your sun sign and your sun house right now. You're letting these fears and this past get in the way of what your destiny and your purpose is today, because ultimately, because the 12th house is your destiny, while the sun represents what you're here to do and your purpose in this lifetime, your destiny is getting over that improper programming while doing it in this lifetime.
Improper programming, that was it. Okay, yeah. So it's like an internal conflict, internal contradiction in yourself. Like we have, that's what we have.
Everybody, right? And that's why every single house in the chart is significant, every single planet. And as I say in sign language, we all know that Mars represents our physical energy, our ability to get up off the couch and move. What sign is your Mars in? That tells me what makes you get up off the couch and move. If your Mars is in Gemini, well, if you see a good argument going on over there, a good debate, you're in there in a New York minute.
Yes.
Yeah. But if it's in Scorpio, a crisis will make you get up and move. Because that's where in your last lifetime you earned your physical skills, was in that arena. Again, now, just like the sun, what house is your Mars in? That's where you promise to use that energy.
Okay, so let's talk about that, the promises, right? Because that's the thing that I kept in mind. I kept in a parenthesis over here. Okay, so the logic is that we have decided what we're going to do in this life and how we're going to use ourselves. That is a provoking statement sometimes, right? When
I was brought up in Catholicism, and it's when I got to be a little bit older, I started questioning things that didn't make sense to me. Since I have discovered this, it only makes more sense to me the teachings that were trying to be taught to me, and what was really trying to be said to me in that strong, core of Christianity that I was brought up in. And it's all about do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Give out what you want back. And that's, I think, the primary lesson of every single religion that comes to light. What I believe, if I combine my Catholic religion and the things that I've read, and again, my all-time favorite hero, Edgar Cayce, and a lot of the things that he had to say, is I believe that we were all at one with God or the universal mind or this omnipresent power that created us. We were just spirits following this omnipresent power and having a wonderful life. And I think in the universe, going anywhere we wanted to, doing the things we wanted to. And according to Cayce, which I strongly believe in, our spirit started to circle this particular planet, this physical planet of Earth, and got very curious, because the soul is very curious, and came down into this planet to see what this physical realm was all about. So it would go into the animals that were existing down here. They'd be doing carnal things like eating and having sex and fighting, and we would go into those animals to experience, to have that experience of sexual behavior, or what did it feel like to be satiated and eat something wonderfully tasty, or to fight with somebody else and declare our, to feel good about ourselves. So what would happen is we'd go into these animals and we'd leave, and the animal on this planet had to deal with the aftermath. Like if it was sexual, we were being sexually promiscuous or whatever, they had to deal with the pregnancy. If they were gorging themselves with food, they had to deal with being sick.
So where did we go? Where did the spirits go after having been in the animal?
The spirits would go into the physical bodies of the animals here on this physical planet, just like our soul. We have physical bodies now, and our soul is in it. They would go in, and when they had enough, they'd leave.
Where would they go then?
They would go back to spirit with God. But the physical being on this planet, whether it was a horse or whether it was a Neanderthal man, those creatures had to deal with the aftermath of the soul's decisions going in. So supposedly our creator said, no, that's not going to fly. You go in, you put energy out, you stay there and deal with the consequences of what you put out. Now, to me, growing up as a Catholic, that sounded an awful lot like original sin. Original sin didn't make sense to me, a baby coming into this world with a sin.
No.
But it makes sense if you say you put out they was calling it a sin. If somebody said that's your original, that's your tally sheet of all the actions you've had before, you say, I get it. It's not a punishment. So he wasn't punishing them. He'd say, you want to gorge yourself with food, then you stay in that being until the aftermath. And according to Cayce and the readings that I believe, this also, for me, on a very scientific level, speaks to the fact that we can't find the missing link in the evolution of man. Maybe it was at this point when we decided we had a consciousness in the physical being. That's where the missing link is. It just took this bolting jump from one level to another when the conscious mind went into the animal that was down here, whether it was a human being or which it had to be, that evolved, whether it was an ape or a monkey or whatever it was, and then it evolved to man. So then I'm thinking, that makes sense to me too. Like I had far less questions listening to this analogy than I did in our religions, where we're just supposed to believe kind of weird stories. But when you look back, those might be stories that were being told to people that didn't quite have the grasp or the understanding of what they were hearing also.
Interesting.
So my feeling is that is exactly what karma is. It's not a punishment. What it is being spiritually responsible for our physical actions. And if you look at any religion known to man, that's what heaven and religion is all about. You're going to get there if you're good. You're going to get there if you're good. So it's not very different. It's just the verbiage and the words that are being used to describe it. One seems like so crazy, and the other we have no problem embracing, that we're spiritual beings, and that if we put out physical actions on some level, we're going to be held in some way accountable for that somewhere down the road.
Yeah, but the thing is that we don't remember. I don't remember having been in one of those animals and started this whole thing.
Edgar Cayce was asked that. They said, why don't we remember? He said, can you imagine how crippling it would be to remember all those things you'd never want to get out of bed in? So I think that's what makes what I do just wonderful for me, because the people who are ready to hear that and embrace it are the people that I find come looking for me or come looking for the answers. You know yourself that there are people in our lives that if we started talking about this, they wouldn't want to hear any part of it.
Yeah.
And that might have been me in the last lifetime, might have been me in early on in this one. But until we're to the point where, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Until we're to that point where we want to do something about it, what purpose does it serve to know about it? And that's what I think is kind of brilliant. That's why it's in the unconscious. That's why the soul knows it. So when the soul is ready, I always say, when people say to me, oh, I said, when the soul is ready is the only kind of client that I want. Yeah. And those are the people that should be buying the workbook or reading the books or listening to podcasts, because yourself, people come into your life for a reason.
Yeah.
People came into mine for a really good one. So I know the people, the people that have helped me, push me to what I'm supposed to be doing, where my joy is. And that's what the sun is. Mm-hmm. I tell my clients this all the time. That's what the sun is in your chart. It's your joy. People come to me and I say, what do you want? I go, well, I want to be happy. I said, I don't think you want to be happy. Every single day, all of us are happy. We're all sad. We're all depressed. We're all confused. We're all resentful. Happiness is an emotion for me that can't be sustained 24/7.
Exactly.
But what we all want is joy. Mm. Happiness is what you experience the day your child is born, the day your book is published, the day you create a podcast, the day you paint this beautiful picture, refinish a car. This is our creative contribution to the universe. And that, even on our worst days, even when you want to throw the baby out the window, blow up the car, or get rid of the painting, even on those days, it never takes away the joy of having created them in the first place. So that's what the sun represents, where we can creatively express ourselves as individuals in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're leaving a joyful life. And that's a joyful life is one the body has worked for and the soul can be proud of. And that's easier to do in my book when you know what kept you from doing it in your last life.
Absolutely. And then recognizing that.
Right.
Reflecting it back on all the patterns that you are locked in now. That's how I use it, right? Or this pattern.
That's exactly right. It's our unconscious habit patterns. And unconscious habit patterns, the only way to get rid of them is to acknowledge them and replace them with something else.
Yeah, if you can.
You can, but I think you can once you consciously acknowledge them. Then you catch yourself.
That's actually that's a question I want to ask you, because I guess that is what we're both doing is, making, helping people gain that awareness, and then there's a step, right? And you call it therapy for the soul. So what is the therapeutic method, if you will? How do you make that next step from, I know now this is what is holding me back and I still struggle with it? What is that therapy? How does that look?
I call it therapy for the soul because I believe I use the birth chart as a therapeutic tool rather than just a predictive one. And I think what my mission is more than anything else, and it's uncanny for me, my experience is how I see that my clients, my readers, the people that do my workbook more than anybody, they'll call me and say, it's instant. The therapy that's instant is validating the soul. To me, when I do my sessions and I say, okay, I'm speaking to the soul now. Yes, this did happen to you. Yes, this did happen and you were programmed to believe this, but that's not the case. You have to release that improper programming because it's buried in the soul. It's in our unconscious. And once the soul realizes that was yesterday, they're not bracing themselves for the same thing in this lifetime, they stop becoming obstacles to us and they start becoming assistants to us. I always say, learning about the past is a very useful thing if we can remember where it belongs. Yeah. If we can use the past as a springboard, not a hammock, because many times our fears keep us locked into the past.
Okay, so you're using the information in the birth chart as a therapy because you're saying when the soul realizes and recognizes this, then it releases the patterns. Is that so?
And it's also that you're making yourself, the conscious part of you, a partner in helping that happen. Because the conscious, the soul's going to say, oh, don't go out there. That's what got us into trouble the last time. Yeah. But now the conscious part of you knows. You say, That was yesterday. Yesterday's gone, remember? And you're kind of walking the soul through the fact that it's now here in this lifetime. And once the soul does that, then it can bring you to places that you can't get on your own. Your psyche, your intuition, your, into any other metaphysical realm to connect to the collective consciousness. I mean, there's all kinds of things but the soul needs the therapy first. The soul needs to be reminded that it's not in yesterday, it's here and now. Because the soul, as I said earlier, loves yesterday. Anything familiar.
Right. And then you have the 12th house analysis, and then you say that's, I misunderstood that, and now I'm gonna do it correctly in a way. I'm gonna embrace those values and motivations, whatever is there, to then do my son.
Correct. And that's the thing. You have to say to yourself, with Cancer on the 12th, and we went into I didn't get into the math and the specific degree, and you have to look to the moon. As I say in the workbook, it shows you not only do you look to where the moon's house placement is, and you get to interpret through the workbook what that means in your last lifetime, but also what's the closest hard aspect to that moon. That's the person or thing that was poking you in the side the last lifetime that you just couldn't move past. Right. It was controlling you, derailing you, crippling you. And so in this lifetime, just knowing that. And so many people say to me when they get this information, especially through the workbook, they say, it was almost as if I learned that I would be avoiding those things because I thought they were going to be my downfall in this lifetime, not realizing that they weren't my downfall in the last lifetime. I just believed they were. And I'm actually supposed to be using them to get where I'm going today, to prove to the universe and God or the universal mind that I'm not going to waste these skills. I'm not going to waste these talents.
That is so interesting. And I think it's appropriate with the workbook because, you got to work through that, and you have the analysis of the therapist, I almost said, from the astrologer, and then you also have your own, right? As listeners of this program is probably in their own astrological language learning, and so you gotta have it through that, and then figure out. And also as we learn information from our birth chart, we still evolve, and then that same information becomes, it lands differently and looks differently. Right?
Exactly. You'd be surprised at how many levels. You think, when I first see this, I think, I aced this, I got this one. And then it's almost as if, when you start to move and evolve, the universe gives you the next step. And then it gives you the next step. I would never have gotten here had I not first addressed that. And it's very, very true. But when you realize many times that we come into this lifetime holding on, waiting for that other shoe to drop, thinking, I don't want to go there. That's not for me. And then when you hear, wait a minute, I'm really good at that. That's what I should be doing. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. In fact, the universe has set up everything in my favor so that when I take a step into that arena, I'll get some positive results. And it might be the very arena we've been avoiding.
So it's the thing that you're afraid of. If you don't know exactly what it is in the chart, you can just think of, this is what I'm scared of, but I sort of want to do it. Is that how it feels?
It's not so much, this is what I'm scared. This is what I believe. I believe before we come into each lifetime, and you've heard people talk about their life flashes before them when they clinically die in this lifetime, and their life flashes before them. There's a wonderful book years ago, Life After Death, and it was an excellent book, and it talked about no matter what religion, what part of the country, or what part of the world, I should say, this was a study of people who had clinically died, and all of them had something came back, and all of them had something very, very much in common. It was the fact that they saw this beautiful being of light that made them feel incredibly comfortable, warm, and loved, and that this lifetime flashed before them. And you always hear that. That's very common, that, my life flashes before me when I'm dying. But this being of light was communicating with them in a way that was not with words, but as they were going through the life, saying, this is where you did really well. That's a good job. This is where you did, you could use a little improvement there, but you'll get better. It was encouraging. It was not critical. And most of the time, these people didn't want to come back. They felt so embraced by this, but they were sent back for whatever the reasons were. And I believe every time we die and we go on to the next life, this is what happens. But this being of light takes it one step further. This universal mind says, okay, you did really well. Now you're going to come back in the next lifetime with this great communications degree, what do you want to do? You didn't do really well in, the outside world the last time. And you say, okay, give me public communications 101. So the universe signs you up, and it puts everything in place in the universe, in your cosmic DNA, so that when all these planets move into the exact alignment like a formula, for you, your soul is dispatched to this planet to be born. And people said to me, "Oh, I wasn't born on the day I was supposed to be born." I said, "You had it backwards. You were born exactly when you were supposed to be. The doctors just didn't know that. You came in, your universal clock, when it ticked into you, the formula for you, you were dispatched because those planets were in alignment to represent your cosmic DNA, so that the certain energies come to you during this lifetime to guide you and direct you to what you universally picked to be your destiny in this lifetime." And again, we have free will. That's the bummer. So we might not live up to that contract. We might do some of it. That's why we have so many lives. We need them to get this work done.
And to remember, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that you do remember. Not remember the life, but everybody comes into this. Well, we've met people in our lifetimes that just seem so advanced spiritually, and other people that feel like they are in kindergarten. Those might be newer souls, and we were there once too. So that's why so many times what I find really interesting is the parents, the two people that created us on this, physically created us on this planet. We tend to deify them and look up to them, whether they were good to us or they were bad to us or they taught us. In our mind, they're bigger than life. They are our gods. They created us. And quite often, they're here to learn from us. We're here to learn from our children more than we are from our parents.
Absolutely.
And that makes sense. And I've had that with my children, where I know why they came to me. I'm learning from them, and their children, they will learn from theirs. Yeah. And that's quite often what happens. So I say many times we look at astrology backwards. We look at Mercury retrograde being one of the things we look at, Mercury retrograde, let's be afraid of it. And I always looked at it, which is why I started doing the formula. Why was this phenomenon occurring? What is the impact? The impact of this phenomenon is on us. It's not the other way around. We're not supposed to. It's here for a reason, to have some impact on us, not for us to avoid. Yeah. And I think that's the purpose of all astrology.
Yeah. That's when you go to that deeper level or deeper layer of it, then it all has a purpose. Okay, so I'm aware of time, and I have a few important things.
Sure.
Because you've mentioned scientific a few times, and I see it when you at your website as well, that you emphasize scientific. Why is that important for you, and what do you exactly mean by that? I'm sure you've already said it somewhere in there, but just to make it clear, where is the scientific piece to this?
Well, astrology is a science, and a lot of people don't want to believe it, and that's totally up to them. But our ancient astronomers, these were the men that it took Saturn 29 and a half years to go around the sun without even having a telescope. These were mathematicians that studied the universe and how the cosmos worked as a whole. And they believed how those movements impacted us down here on Earth. So all of us, the physical part of us, the spiritual part of us, and the mental part of us, to them, there were 3 levels of energy in this universe: mental, spiritual, and physical. And everything in this universe vibrated to all 3. Whether it be a pencil or a person, they operated and vibrated on all 3 levels of energy. So to these brilliant minds, ancient minds, they never separated the science of astronomy, how the heavens worked as a whole, and astrology, how those movements impacted us on Earth. Now look at meteorology. It's the same thing. We tune into the news every night to listen to the weather, think nothing of it, because those are physical. There's physical evidence of what they're telling us: the rain, the snow, the wind. But just because you can't measure the effects of the spiritual effects, we're supposed to discard it. How egotistical is that? Right. Do we supposedly know everything in this universe? So they operated, both sciences were one. And it was only later on, when the church came along and didn't want all their minions running to astrologers for guidance, that they turned around and they made the astrology part of it a cult. They no longer saw that as a science. The ancients never forsook the astrology. They always kept them as one science. They were one science, astrology and astronomy, how the heavens worked and moved and how they impacted us.
It's
And they
a great comparison with the weather, weather
it's
forecast.
all
Yeah.
math. Everything, like when you come into, I say it's your contract with the universe. That's what your birth chart is. And that's the way they looked at it too. What you're here to do in this lifetime, because they're taking a snapshot of what the heavens look like above, around, and below you. It's one picture in time. And in that picture, they can glean so much information about you. Like I said, it's almost like giving somebody your driver's license back in that day. We're putting a sample of your blood under a microscope. So they never said to you, they would never say like, "Oh, you're going to be a wonderful communicator. You're going to be 10 feet tall." They said, just like if we looked at DNA under a microscope, they're saying this is your potential.
Yeah.
This is what you signed up for. This is what you can be. But again, this is you have to do the work. You have to show up. You can't phone it in. And some of us want to show up. Others of us are tired. Others are, it's like, talking to a kindergartner and talking to somebody who's going for their master's. There's all types of souls in this world. Some of them are ready for this. Some of them are not.
Right.
But we were all of us will be on both ends of that spectrum sooner or later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like a spiral of evolution is how I imagine it. That we have to go through all of the stages.
It's fascinating. For me, it's very fascinating because there's so much math in astrology, and math is a science, just as there is in astronomy. And I these guys were my heroes when I think of the things that they shared with us that have never been disputed. They were actually right so many eons ago. They were right in what, that it takes Mercury 88 days to go around the sun, and when it travels backward in the sky. And I'm thinking Mercury is so close to the horizon, how they could even see Mercury or find it. I still can't find it. I have to use a computer to find it. I could never find that in the sky, and I have telescopes. So these men were brilliant. So my feeling is I'm going to stick with them. If they believe this birth chart was something to talk to people about where they came from, what they have, what their potential is in this lifetime, and they can use it predictively. The way they used it predictively is they take the template of your birth chart and they look at the way things are moving in the heavens today's transits, and they compare them mathematically to those same points in your birth chart, where the sun was in your birth in your chart at the moment of your birth, where the sun is in the sky now, or Mars, and how it's impacting that point in your chart. That's what predictive astrology is, and it's all math.
Yeah.
Very, very accurate. So that's why I see it as a science.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. But yeah, absolutely. That's our prehistory, is that it was so connected. Juno, I wanted to ask you a bit about that, because a lot of people are now very curious about the asteroids, and one thing is to be curious about it, and another thing is to get that deeper understanding of what it actually is. I mean, you can have a few keywords, right? I've heard it. A keyword could be Jupiter's wife. This, it has to do with your relationship choice. But then you have a sort of a whole philosophy around Jupiter. Around Juno, I mean.
I do it with the four main asteroids. I'm working on the other asteroids. Juno was the first e-booklet I put out, and I see the primary, the sun and the moon and the planets as our primary points in the birth chart. But I also see the four main asteroids: Ceres, Juno, Vesta, and Pallas. They're the secondary players, if you will, and they kind of support the primary plays. They help you dig deeper. And Juno, who was named after Zeus's wife, Jupiter's wife, Juno and Jupiter, Zeus and Hera, in Greek astrology, she was his. They did some horrible things to each other. It was a really very turbulent relationship. But the one thing about Juno, she was the queen, he was the king. She refused to give up her place for anybody else. And she was dead set on holding him accountable for his cheating, for the things that he was doing. And she held her own because in her mind, they were committed. He had tricked her into marrying him. And once they were married, she was taking those vows very seriously, even though he wasn't. So as a result, between the lightning bolts being tossed at each other and all the horrible things they did to each other, this was the hill Juno wanted to die on. She wanted to die on the hill of commitment. And by God, that's what she was going to do. She was not going to let him get out from under his commitment to her, because he tricked her into marriage. And to her, that was those marriage vows were very important. Commitment was the biggest thing to her. So that's what, and I always say what I love about astrology. When you read my book, Sign Language, I explain each planet, what it does in the skies above, according to the ancients, and why that has the impact it does in your chart below. So to that point, Juno in your birth chart represents commitment. It represents, doesn't matter, Venus represents what you're attracted to, who you have an eye for, who you think is very dreamy, or somebody that you just can't wait to be with. But let me tell you, if Juno's needs aren't being met in your chart, that relationship is gone. It's doomed. Because Juno is there to make sure that you hold out for what you didn't get in your last lifetime. Juno in the chart represents where your Zeus was in a previous life, where your partner in a previous life didn't respect you, didn't give you what you needed. And she's there in the chart to represent what you promised to hold out for in a relationship in this lifetime, or else the relationship will go down the tubes. And they usually do. Whether you pull the plug or somebody else does, or it blows up in your face, it never goes the distance if you don't demand to have your needs met with that relationship.
So again, it's put together from the past. It's this went wrong, and now you're committed.
Exactly. That's what I love about karmic astrology. That's what all my astrology is about, is finding that birth energy now. And what does it say about you in the past? What are you here to do with it now? It's easier to understand why we're here to do with it now if we find out what we didn't do with it in the last one.
Can you give an example, just a random one of the signs, just as an
with
example?
Juno, I should look up. I could look up where your Juno is.
I know where it is. It's in Sagittarius with
you have a Juno in Sagittarius?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember. I don't have your chart in front of me. Do you have the house,
in
house?
the fifth house?
Okay, so if you came into this incarnation with Juno and Sagittarius, the big thing I always call Juno's pick, what that's telling me about you is that you need a partner now in this lifetime, and I might have even said this to you with Juno and Sag, whose background, religion, culture, or upbringing is entirely different than your own in this lifetime. Okay. You need someone who has a quest for knowledge and adventure and gives you the opportunity and the license to go out and explore, to move past your boundaries in this lifetime, beyond your limitations, because in the last lifetime, your partner didn't let you do that. That means both intellectually, you were intellectually stunted in that last lifetime, and physically restricted by your previous partner. So your soul is now committed to a partner who is going to give you, the license and the opportunity to explore new horizons, to exciting new horizons. And he must be capable of providing you with the freedom to do it on yourself or by yourself if you want to.
Yes.
Because you never got that in your last life. And now, yes. So just to show you, Venus, just say you have a Venus, you have your chart in front of you. Where is your Venus?
It's in Pisces. I have it in my head.
Okay, just to show you, with your Venus in Pisces, you're going to always be attracted to somebody who's very kind of mysterious and higher otherworldly, in the sense that they're creative artists, people that don't seem to be in the humdrum harsh realities of life. They seem to be above it all. They seem to be more spiritual, and that's the kind of partner that you find yourself very, very attracted to. Somebody who's creative, somebody who is idealistic, somebody who can see the world the way it should be. And that's wonderful. That's somebody who you find very attractive, who you actually can be physically and mentally attracted to. However, if they're not giving you the freedom that this Juno in your birth chart is demanding, that relationship is going to go south.
Right, like that. Right.
That's how you bring both energies together. Yeah. Juno, this is what I'm attracted to, and that's wonderful. And Venus is always about the steamy part of the relationship, but Juno is holding out for she's saying, this is what you promised you were going to get in this lifetime. You're not going to let anybody take that away from you, because it's important to you.
So it's like you need both, right? It sounds like you need both.
Well, the thing is, you really don't need the Venus.
Okay.
Venus is fun. Okay, Venus is fun. Venus is what excites us. It's happy. It's fun. It's exciting. It's the sex. It's the passion. It's how attractive that person is. But Juno said, okay, but is he going to come home every night? Okay, is he going to give you the freedom that you're just going to be very possessive? That's what she's saying. Because, have fun with Venus, but the relationship isn't going to last unless you get this. So it's kind of smart for us to know that I say, if you're not getting what you need from your Juno, back away from the relationship because you're not in it to win it. It's not going to happen.
So is there a dark side to Juno then?
It's not that it's a dark side. It's the fact that, think of it in your last lifetime. If you had somebody that kept you a prisoner in your own home, Juno is your champion now. She's saying, you're going to get in this lifetime, somebody's going to let you have the freedom to go outside. And you could say, oh, yes, yes. And then you meet somebody who's really attractive and they're a hottie and you just want them. And you say, oh, I don't need that now. And you go, oh, yes, you do. Go have fun. But I'm telling you, this relationship won't last if this person doesn't give it to you.
That's a really good, short philosophy of it. This is, if you don't have this, the relationship won't work.
Exactly.
It's a good one to remember.
You asked for that. That's what you didn't get in the last lifetime.
Yeah.
And that's why your relationship didn't last.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, amazing. Oh, Marguerite, I could just listen to you for such a long time, and it seems you can continue to talk. You have so much on your heart, and I love that. And it's not you are able to communicate it to us, so I really appreciate that.
Anytime you want to do this again, I'd be happy.
Great. So, okay, can you just consider if there's this one last point that you want to make, and then I just take a little screenshot of us, and people can see it on social media. Sure. If I'm lucky to click the right buttons here. Okay, I'll do a screenshot. 1, 2, 3. Hey, there it is.
Okay.
Got it. So do you have anything just to end this conversation?
I think what I love most about karmic astrology, and what I encourage everybody just to look into their 12th house. And your time of birth is incredibly important because the tilt of the Earth's axis tells me what sign is on the 12th house at the moment of your birth. And you can find that in your birth chart very easily, especially in the workbook. It has all the charts to show you how to do that. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is it's so much easier to get where you're going when you know where you came from. Yeah. And it's just that simple. Knowing where you came from you can look back and see how much progress you've made and where you've done well. Otherwise, I feel as individuals, we're just kind of floundering around down here thinking, should I do this? But it's so wonderful to look in there and say, this is what I chose. Yeah. This is what I'm equipped to do. This is what the universe has opened up a path for me. And don't get me wrong, when you're living up to your contract with the universe, as I say in my books, you're not going to start seeing angels and hearing bells, but the things that were created challenges for you and obstacles, they seem to kind of fade away. You will have bumps in the road, but you seem to have the tools to deal with them. And that's the whole point, that it's not supposed to be an unbumpy ride. It's supposed to be one that we can handle the bumps and move around them and get beyond them and feel good about ourselves. Yeah. Growth never happens in our comfort zone. It just doesn't. Whether it's a book, whether it's music, whether it's sex, when we're very comfortable and familiar with something, it's not exciting. There's no growth. It's only when we don't know what's coming, then we see what we can do, like how much of a part we play in it. That gives us a lot of self-worth, and it's a lot of evolution there.
That is so important to remember when you're in that place, and I know that place very well, but you don't know what's going to happen, or you don't know why this is happening, then actually you say that's the only way to growth.
And that's happened so many times in this work where I've had people call up and want to do an interview. The very first when I was starting, and they were scientists, and they wanted me on their radio program. Uh-huh. And I was like, okay, I know what this is all about. They just want to, you were an astrologer. Yeah. And I told my editor at Llewellyn, I said, no, I don't think I want to go on. She says, I said, I want them to understand that this is a karmic approach to astrology, and that this is for the people that see this as the tool. She came back, she said, no, they're adamant. So I went on, and I thought, well, what I liked about it was a podcast. So if they started any nonsense, I could just say, okay, sorry guys, see you around the campus. But that didn't happen. We got into a really great discussion. They wanted to, and this man wrote a book on the binary star, about our binary stars. Okay. And he was so interesting, and he wanted to know how the planets don't line up to, the signs don't line up to the don't line up anymore.
Constellations, yeah.
Right, yeah. So then we got into a discussion about the precession of the equinox. And I said, that's why I believe that that they're telling us about the past. The signs are not telling us about the now. Those are the house placements. The signs are telling us about yesterday, about our last life. That's why they don't line up anymore. So we had this wonderful discussion. I grew so much talking to these two men. It was one of the best things I've ever done. I was very proud. They're the first astrologer they ever had on a program.
That's nice.
And I thought I was this close to not going because I was afraid that they were just, again, the public scrutiny. I was afraid they were going to just try to, deride what I was doing.
I see. And they could have, but you...
They could have, but had I stayed in my comfort zone, I never would have experienced that.
Exactly. Great. Yeah, and I'm thinking that it's not just do anything that you're afraid of, because in your story, in your example here, it's because this is your purpose, right? This is what this is the meaningful thing for you to show up for, and then there's the fear that they might reject you, but then it's still meaningful because you're doing what you're here to do with astrology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it was a good lesson for me, and I'm still learning every day.
We are. Thank you so much, Marguerite Manning. Thank you so much. And
thank you, man. And you're wonderful to talk to. I love having these conversations with you. So anytime you want to touch on any other part of the karmic part of the birth chart,
yes,
I'm your gal.
Great. Thank you so much.